Welcome aboard to the Captain Crypto Show. Today, we join the Captain's Council to discuss the latest developments in the world of cryptocurrency. Here's your host, Kylan Hurt.
And welcome aboard to the Captain Crypto Show. Tonight, it's Wednesday, January 3rd, 2018. That means it's a brand new year. And actually, since it's January 3rd, that also means that it's the 9th birthday of the Genesis block, the first block that was ever mined of Bitcoin 9 years ago. It's crazy to think that Bitcoin is almost 10 years old, but it's a brand new year, and that means brand new beginnings, even for us here at the Captain Crypto Show. Tonight, we're actually coming to you, doing our recording from the new Captain's Lair, my new recording studio, which is in downtown sunny San Diego. So, new year, new beginnings, and hopefully it's going to be a great year for cryptocurrency. All right, well, tonight I'm joined by my co-host, Jackson. Some of you may recognize his voice, Jackson. This is your first time in the new studio. What do you think of it?
It's pretty fantastic. It's a huge improvement to what we used to do. For anybody who hasn't tuned into our live streams where we record this before, you might not know that we used to record these in the Edge offices. They were gracious enough to let us use our office many, many times, but it was a little bit echoey in there, and we wanted to produce the best show possible, so we went ahead and created a huge blanket fort around our little table to make sure that we cut out as much echo as possible. So I'll miss the days of monkeying around on ladders trying to make the best sound quality for you guys possible, but this is going to be a huge improvement, and it looks pretty fantastic in here.
Yeah, as thankful as I am for having the Edge team let us use their offices, without a doubt, the building that they're in, without going into too much detail where it's located or anything like that, but there was a lot of concrete, so there was a ton of echo, and it was definitely an uphill battle trying to make the acoustics work for the recording of an audio podcast. So as Jackson hinted, what we would do is we would hang up these blankets in an attempt to dampen the actual echoes. So it would take us a good 15, 20 minutes to set it up. We'd have to get up on these ladders, hang these blankets from the rafters, and we were using these acoustic shields as well. So it would, if you were watching the live stream, it looked like we were talking into these kind of weird foam, I don't know, they're acoustic shields. It's hard to describe them. But I'd like to think that those days are over. I think that we have definitely earned our stripes, and I believe that the new studio is a big improvement. And hopefully starting next week, once my internet connection is working correctly, hopefully we should be able to stream live video and you guys will be able to get a good glimpse of what the new studio looks like. Who knows, we might have to make sure that we're looking good for the camera, though, because that's recording audio is one thing, but recording video is a whole nother animal.
I always look good.
Okay, well, it's been a couple of weeks since you last heard us here at the Captain's Council, and while it was the holidays and in some ways some of the news stories did slow down, cryptocurrency, as we always say, never really completely sleeps. So one story that has come across our desk within the last week or so was that a CEO of an exchange in Ukraine known as Exmo, I believe the CEO's name is Pavel Werner, it's something like that, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but essentially what happens is it sounded like he was kidnapped by a gang, a local Ukrainian gang, and they tried to get him to give up his private keys, his cryptocurrency private keys, access to his funds. And it sounds like on one hand maybe they were not able to get access to all of his funds, but he was freed, it sounds like, when he or people that he's close with paid the ransom to free him. Jackson, you also read this story. What were your immediate thoughts when you heard about this?
Yeah, I've been following this for quite a bit. My immediate thought was, man, that's scary. We've already talked about in this show quite a few times about how cryptocurrency is making new things possible. And unfortunately, a lot of those things aren't exactly legal things. So just like you're able to do some ransomware on a computer and making that a lot easier because you can be paid across the internet, semi-anonymously. Now you can also monetize crimes like kidnapping people. So that was pretty scary to hear, and pretty much anybody in the Bitcoin space needs to be a little bit aware of that because you're walking around with basically a bearer asset that can be transferred to anybody at any time, and having that access to that money makes you a target.
Yeah, some of my immediate thoughts were, first off, that a lot of the people who have made a lot of money in cryptocurrency are not really known to be the hardest people in town, right? So if they get kidnapped, I don't know how much they'll be able to resist or survive any sort of coercion or torture that goes on, right? You have a lot of people that are maybe a CEO of an exchange, something like that. A lot of these cryptocurrency businesses are related to tech. So this isn't like an athlete. It's not like kidnapping an athlete. It's not like kidnapping a fighter, anything like that. It's quite the opposite. But a lot of us do think that, okay, well, our funds are secure because we know the password. As long as no one else knows the password, then we're fine. But there are obviously things when in reality, you've seen the movies, but there are things that people can do to try to get you to give up those private keys. And it sounds like in this case, maybe they were not able to access all of his funds, but they were able to make out literally like bandits and made a good amount of money off of a ransom. So it's not like they left empty-handed, and now you have to wonder, okay, they've gotten their taste of that money. Is this something that's going to be becoming more frequent? Obviously, I certainly hope not, and hopefully a country like a country like Ukraine would crack down on this sort of activity. But I think it's something that people have to be increasingly aware of. Especially if you're someone in the public light and people know that you're involved with cryptocurrency, maybe you've done a little bit of bragging online, or maybe in this case, it's something where you actually are an employee of a known cryptocurrency company. This is something where you do have to keep an eye on things, because there are people who do want access to your funds, and if you're not careful, then you could end up kind of like this guy. Luckily, he came out alive, but you have to think that in some cases, people might not be so lucky, right?
Yeah, just wrapping back around to a little bit more of the details of the story. The exchange that he runs, Exmo,
right.
Immediately came out and tried to reassure all of the depositors that...
Oh my, I didn't even think about that part.
Yeah, so how are you going to feel if your money gets used to pay the ransom to save the guy who runs the exchange you use? Like, that wouldn't feel very good, but...
Right, and you do wonder if your exchange is doing development or whatever. This sort of thing would cause a lot of chaos within a company. Imagine going to work one day and, your CEO, yeah, he's gone missing, he's kidnapped, and as far as you're concerned, he might be getting tortured. I'm sure that would have an effect, as you said, on investors, whether they're users of the exchange or whether they are actually investors. So that amount of chaos, that's the sort of thing you would never wish upon anyone.
Yeah, and then to extend the already harrowing details of the story, the on-ramps for cryptocurrency are pretty good now. Just because you don't own cryptocurrency doesn't mean that the people can't kidnap you and demand cryptocurrency. The people that they expect to pay the ransom are quite capable of getting Bitcoin, or Monero would even be a better idea, to pay these ransoms. So it's not really a crypto-specific thing. It's just something that has just been made a whole lot easier.
Yeah, it's true. Once, this is kind of off topic, but once I was in another country, which I won't name, I was a lot younger, and I got essentially shaken down by the police, and they kind of say, oh, you're in trouble for whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is that you're in trouble, and they kind of hint that, oh, you need to pay a fine, which I'm sure is not legal. They're not following the legal book. But if you don't have money, what they do is they take you to the ATM and they say, okay, well, here you go. We'll let you go to the ATM and get some money out. So saying you don't have any money is not an excuse. And like you said, now it's something where a lot of people have Coinbase accounts or cryptocurrency wallets, or they're super easy to get. So it's another way that bad actors can make money doing bad things. That's the nature of technology, though, I suppose.
Yeah, do you think we should go over a little bit about what kind of things we could do for some preventative measures here? Or?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, if you have at it.
Well, I don't think there is any good solution, but I think probably the solution that's right off the top of my head is make sure that there is some third key solution with your money. So if you have a multi-sig address with two of the keys in your control, but one of them is way off in the mountains somewhere that you'll never go to unless you absolutely have to have it, and then you have to sign, and whoever your third key provider is, either a lawyer or a bank or something like that, signing, and you have some sort of like distress call thing where even if a kidnapper is holding you hostage, you couldn't send that money even if you wanted to without that third key. That sort of thing could help, and then you don't have to rely on that third-party signer either, because you have the access if you really have to.
Right, but you're still gonna have to find a way to get them to let you run free too, though, right? So it's not all super easy, is it?
No, like I don't think that's a perfect solution either. Another one that is kind of bandied about is having on your hardware wallet a separate passphrase with only a small amount of money in it, so you can open up your wallet and go, you can have all the money that is in my wallet. You can have everything, and you only have 10%, 5%, whatever you feel is believable in that account.
Yeah, we've actually talked about doing that here at Edge. We're coming out with a new Edge wallet, and there have been talks about, okay, well, we have a regular PIN. What if we were to add something where there's kind of like a distress PIN? So it's a set code. It's a code that you set yourself, and when you enter that code, instead of showing you your full amount, it'll show you, okay, you have $200 or something that's small. So that's something that we have discussed. I don't know if any other wallets have it, but I think it is a good idea. And anything that could throw an obstacle in the way of bad actors, I think, is a step forward. The other thing that I'll mention too is that I guess you do bring up a good point that with the on-ramps, even if you are not known to have cryptocurrency, they could still try to find a way to get you to use some sort of exchange to get that cryptocurrency quick and then send it to them. But definitely there's a motto in security that goes security through obscurity. And that's just kind of, okay, don't let people know too much about you, about where you live, about where you hold your funds, about how many funds or how much funds you do or don't have. And in general, if people don't know much about you, if they don't see you, if you aren't the loud guy at the bar, then you might not be the target, right? You won't be the target if no one can see you. I'm not saying that you have to be a complete recluse, but in general, I believe people should err on the side of caution when it comes to giving out information about themselves because attackers need information in order to pull off a successful attack, right? So there are definitely a lot of things that you can do, but I think the first step is really just actually starting to think about it because this is the world that we're living in now. Even a few years ago, you didn't see these sorts of stories. Now it seems like we're seeing them with increased frequency.
Yeah, if you make it in the crypto world, drive a Corolla, not a Lambo.
Yeah. So within the last couple of weeks, if there's one token or currency that has been performing well, it has been Ripple. And Ripple is, in my opinion, it might be the most controversial cryptocurrency in the space right now. I know Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash have been traditionally or historically pretty controversial. But I think with Ripple, a lot of people argue that it's not a real cryptocurrency, that it's centralized. There are a lot of people that have reservations about it. And to be fair, I should give a little disclaimer here. I'm not a big Ripple fan, and I don't think Jackson is either. But within the last couple of weeks, it's gone up essentially, gosh, what is it, like 10-fold, 15, 20-fold? So it's at the point where even though it might not seem like a true cryptocurrency in the sense when it comes to decentralization, without a doubt, this is something where you can't ignore Ripple at this point. It's right up in your face. And a lot of the people that I know who are very experienced and knowledgeable with cryptocurrency, who've been around for a long time, they're kind of like I am, where they kind of don't really fully get behind Ripple. Maybe we do understand why some people find it attractive, but we're not convinced. But now it's at the point where Ripple's actually, it's ranked number 2 on coin market cap. So it has replaced Ethereum as size-wise as the second largest cryptocurrency. So I think it's becoming more and more difficult to just ignore Ripple. But for example, last night I was actually getting a Lyft from, just a Lyft driver here in San Diego. And I mentioned that I work for a cryptocurrency company. I work for Edge. He should check out Edge Wallet. And he mentioned that he was invested in Ripple. And I noticed one thing was that when he was trying to explain why he decided to buy Ripple, he essentially said that Bitcoin was at something like $10,000, $15,000. And he didn't feel like he could really buy much of one, right? Because maybe he didn't fully understand how divisibility works. But then he looked at the price of Ripple and it was somewhere around 20 cents. So just on paper, your immediate reaction is, oh, that seems more affordable. But what he probably didn't calculate was that when you look at market capitalization, and I'm not saying that's the be-all, end-all statistic, when you buy a unit of Ripple, you're buying a much smaller portion of the Ripple tokens as compared to 1 unit of Bitcoin when it comes to the total supply of Bitcoin. So I think in a way that's playing a role in it, but I guess we should take a step back and kind of discuss what our understanding of Ripple is, because this is actually a token that has been not rebranded, but they have pivoted. I think a few years ago they were trying to target more consumer-to-consumer transactions, but it seems like they have completely pivoted away from that. Now they're focusing on becoming, as I understand it, a competitor to like SWIFT or ACH or other types of money transfers that occur between banks. Is that your understanding of it, Jackson?
Yeah, that is my understanding of it. That's how it was introduced to me. I actually didn't know that they used to be consumer focused, but I'd always heard it explained to me that it was more for banks to transfer value between each other over the Ripple network, which I don't think that there's anybody who can justify that you actually need the Ripple token to do that. So that's why it's kind of confusing to me.
Yeah, there has been a lot of confusion. I think a big part of the confusion is that a lot of the information that we get about Ripple, since it is fairly centralized, since it's fairly centralized, a lot of the information we're getting is coming straight from the Ripple company itself. And it doesn't really seem like, when I read these articles, it doesn't seem like there's much fact-checking that's going on. And that concerns me because a lot of these articles, they sound more like marketing material to me. Oh, we're about to do this. We're going to be able to do that. Oh, this bank, there's a lot of name dropping too. Oh, this big bank did this. This big bank is partnering. And we just saw what happened with IOTA just a couple of weeks ago, how all that information can get misconstrued. And it seems like at this point, I don't know of anyone, and I know of plenty of people who are holding the XRP tokens, which are supposedly Ripple's tokens, right? So I don't know anyone, of all the people that own it, I don't know anyone who's actually sent some to someone else. So I think that's, for starters, something that concerns me. Although, to be fair, most people have not done anything like that with Litecoin or Ethereum, and less with Bitcoin. So I guess that's not by itself a full argument, but it is something that raises a red flag. I mean, of the Ripple holders that you know, have any of them actually tried buying something with Ripple before?
No, definitely not. I don't know any Ripple users at all. I know few Ripple owners. But just a few things that kind of make me worry a little bit that I think most people know already, but if you don't. Ripple Labs, the company behind Ripple, owns the vast majority of Ripple, and they hold it in reserve. So that's kind of an interesting thing. The tradable Ripple is completely dwarfed by the amount of Ripple that the company still holds. So that's kind of interesting. And then the other part is that it's a completely centralized system. They are the judge and jury on that system. So if the government leans on them, they will have to censor transactions. There is no anonymous miners that they can't put pressure on. It's just basically PayPal targeting bigger banks.
And they have done that in the past, haven't they? Because
yeah, I believe
I've read articles where they said that they've either done it or tried to do that, which I think a lot of us who've been in cryptocurrency for a while see this sort of censorship, and it's one of the things that we are trying to avoid. But trying to convey that to some of the people who are watching their returns just skyrocket during the last few weeks, they're not really – I guess you don't really have to listen to that sort of stuff or have to care when you're getting more and more money, right?
Yeah. And Ripple is a confusing thing to me. Like, if you want to compete with the SWIFT network and you think you can build a better way for banks to transfer funds, that's good. Like, if you want to invest in that, that's great. But you're not buying a part of that company. You're buying this token equity that just has this ambiguous value that I don't know what you want to do with it, but...
Right, and my understanding, and to be fair, things have changed since I first really started looking into Ripple. So I know you talked about, I guess you would call it the pre-mine of tokens. I think it was, at least it used to be 60% of all tokens were held by the Ripple company. I think that number is lower now, and they have some sort of escrow where they're going to release it over time, which I guess kind of alleviates some of those arguments. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, why were you hoarding them in the first place? What does that tell us about the leadership at your company or at your project? Another concern was that these XRP tokens, I know I already mentioned it before, everyone's talking about, oh, this bank's going to use the Ripple network. Well, as I understand it, the actual Ripple network itself does not need XRP tokens. So there's a question about what role those XRP tokens really will play and where their value is really being derived from. And it's unfortunately, with all the hype, it's hard to sift through the BS and get to some actual meat. And that's been one of the frustrations that I've had when it's come to investigating or trying to do research into Ripple. So for those of us who would actually be willing to come on board, if we were able to get solid answers to our questions, you'll find that when it comes to finding information about Ripple, it can be quite a bit of a challenge. But I mean, what other kind of issues have you seen with Ripple, Jackson?
Yeah, just as like a closing note as my last features. I think if you are one of the people that have made a lot of money on Ripple, like more power to you, that's awesome. But I think you should start imagining like where your space in this system is. Like, why do they need speculators trying to determine the price that aren't the customers? Like, the customers are supposed to be the big banks. Right? So why do they need you as an outside speculator to help determine the price of a service that you'll never use and probably won't understand? So I think you should be pretty careful about participating in the system, not knowing what your value to it is.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, there is a question of, well, what's the point in letting outside consumers even hold or buy these tokens in the first place? If the Ripple networks can be bank to bank, it does kind of raise the question, what is the point? So I think, just to end this in a little bit here, I think a lot of the speculation has come since Bitcoin Cash was added to Coinbase. A lot of the people who are either Ripple fans or even if they're not Ripple fans, they kind of use their imagination and ask themselves, okay, well, which of these other coins or projects are likely to be added to Coinbase? And it seemed like Ripple was probably the number one. Certainly, it is a project that has been around for a long time, and it is also one that sees a lot of trading. And Coinbase is an exchange. They make money off of trading, so it would make sense that Ripple would probably be on the short list. Now that it's ranked at number 2 for market capitalization, it really has to be, I'm not going to say it has to be number 1 on their list, but it has to be on toward the top of the short list. So I guess ultimately I can't really tell people what they should and shouldn't buy, but I will say if you have been lucky enough to see 20-fold gains in the last week or so, last couple of weeks with Ripple, just ask yourself, at what point do you need to cash some of that out? What risks are you willing to take? Because while the gains with Ripple have been very large, I would say that among the top cryptocurrencies, it is probably, I don't know if I'd call it the most risky investment, but it is way, way up there. So definitely think to yourself too, if you're a Ripple holder and kind of the holy grail of what you're hoping for is that it gets added to Coinbase, play out that scenario in your head real quick. Let's say hypothetically it gets added to Coinbase. So it gets added, news, as you saw with Bitcoin Cash, before you even get the news, everyone else has already gotten the news. So it seems like maybe an hour or two beforehand, it starts to go up a bunch. Maybe some people will know why. Most people will not know why. And then as it peaks, as it skyrockets, then what happens after that? What is next for Ripple in the short or medium term after it's been added to Coinbase? I know people are talking about it being used in the future for Bank XYZ, but it sounds like even the most pro-Ripple people know that those sorts of developments are a year or more away. So after getting added to Coinbase, I think there is that question of, okay, is that going to cause this bubble to pop? And ultimately, only time will tell. And I just hope that you guys as listeners, if you've made quite a bit of money off of Ripple, I hope you consider diversifying a little bit to protect yourself and make sure that you are able to keep plenty of those gains.
So one of the stories that I thought was interesting this week was United Bitcoin. It popped onto my radar, feels like a few weeks back. I think it's Jeff Garzik new side project, and I believe he started working on it either shortly after or shortly before his laser focus on SegWit 2x. So it kind of makes me doubt his laser focus.
Not a fan. So this is going to be a fork, is that correct?
Yeah, so it is going to be a fork of Bitcoin. So just like most forks of Bitcoin, if you own Bitcoin at the time of the fork, which was December 13th, then you will be able to get the same amount of United Bitcoin on this new network. But there is a little hitch in that for this particular fork, and that is that your coins had to be active over the last month and a half, meaning that you had to have sent something outbound from your address within the last month and a half, or they'd be considered inactive coins for this fork. And United Bitcoin is going to take control of all those inactive coins, meaning all the coins that haven't moved since Satoshi's coins have been dead on the network for the last 6 years or so, and any other coins that haven't moved in the recent past will all be going over to the United Bitcoin Foundation, and they'll use those funds for developer fees or developer bounties, and also as some strategic reserves for some other projects they're planning on doing. Right. So it's basically just a novel way of pre-mining on most people's opinions.
Yeah, it sounds like one way of kind of swiping funds. On one hand, yeah, you're able to do a fork whenever you'd like. That's the nature of open source code. But this is kind of strange. It's almost like there's making this assumption that, well, if you haven't used your cryptocurrency during this certain period of time, that all of a sudden you're not entitled to it. So I think that's definitely it might be a kind of new idea, but it is a very strange one. I don't think, my gut feeling is I don't know if I could get behind that. What do you think?
I don't know that I would completely behind it. In fact, I think I'm not, but I do think it's interesting. I mean, when you are giving all of the coin, or if you do a fork and you give all the Bitcoin users your coin, you're hoping that those Bitcoin users will be interested in your coin and join your community and start using your coin. And then if you can then segment out even further and grab only the active Bitcoin users that are probably the ones that are having the most pain points with fees lately, because the fees are so high on Bitcoin, that they might be actually looking for a new network to try to test out and see if it can be better than Bitcoin. I think that's kind of an interesting way to do that, is to make sure that you only get very active users that might be looking for a new solution, whereas the holders, they don't really care about Bitcoin fees. They don't move their Bitcoin very much. It's working for them. They're not that interested in jumping to a new coin.
Right. Yeah, I think it is interesting, as you mentioned, this is, since it's forking from Bitcoin, it's not like you can really pre-mine it, but this is essentially the next best thing. You essentially swipe the funds away from the people who are not very active, and you put into what kind of sounds to me a little bit like a slush fund. Maybe that's a little too derogatory for some people. I know Dash has something similar. There are other cryptocurrencies that use these, I don't know what you'd call them. I call them slush funds. These funds that come from wherever they come from and are used. Essentially, I'd hate to say it, but it sounds kind of, usually when I hear these solutions, they seem a little centralized. Like, okay, these master nodes will decide where it goes, or this core group of developers will decide where it goes. To me, that kind of, it reeks of centralization. At least that's my gut feeling.
Yeah, I don't think you could make any argument that this isn't a more centralized system than Bitcoin. But if I could just run through their feature list real quick. So they are going with 8 megabyte blocks. They are including SegWit. They are promising to enable a Lightning Network type solution in the coming year. They are also trying to do smart contracting type platforms, and they are going to use those funds that they acquired, pilfered, stole, however you want to describe it, to back some stable coin like coins using their smart contract.
Do you want to try to explain to the listeners what a stable coin is?
So the way that I'm seeing it is it's going to be like Tether. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's going to be like Tether. So Tether puts out a Tether into the Tether network every time they get a US dollar. So it's always supposed to be a 1-to-1 match. So they are going to use those funds that they got in their pre-mine and buy some USD and then put a token on their network and be able to trade USD across their network. So I think that is kind of an interesting thing to do, but I don't know that I can completely accept how centralized it is.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have attempted to create stable coins. I don't know if anyone's really successfully done it, and I don't know whether it'll be successfully done or not. So it is kind of, I guess it's interesting that they're working on it. I don't know what their reasoning is for focusing on that. I know seems like there are other projects that are already working on stablecoin solutions. But Jeff Garzik, in your opinion, has he had success in the past with some of his ventures? I know Segwit 2x ended up not happening, but
I don't know every thing he's
Every
ever
detail,
done in his
right.
body of work, but I do know that he has been in Bitcoin
For a long
since
time,
almost the very beginning. So we definitely have to give him credit for that. 9 years ago, he was one of the first ones around. But lately, it doesn't seem like any of his projects have caught my eye. And it doesn't seem like Segwit 2x left a very good mark on his record.
Right. Yeah. So I guess maybe the positive thing is even if something doesn't come of this project, if you are able to access your Bitcoin United funds.
United Bitcoin.
Excuse me, United Bitcoin. These days it's hard to keep track of all of the forks. But yeah, if you've gotten some free coins, you can sell them or you can hold them if you're really in it, if you're really adventurous, I guess.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out one more thing that I learned while researching them, and that is that their domain name that they picked up is ub.com, and that is singled out as a very expensive address.
Right.
So
It's
there
short.
is some
Yeah.
big money backing this
Okay.
project.
Yeah, and in the past, if there's something that we've seen is that there are times where money can get a project and make it quite a bit more successful than you otherwise might think it would be. So that I guess that is something to keep your eye on, I guess.
Yeah, so just to recap, December 13th, I believe at midnight is when the fork block happened. So if you own Bitcoin during that time, then you want to check and make sure if you have United Bitcoin. But the United Bitcoin isn't actually being released until I believe the 24th of January. So it's still upcoming, but you can kind of try to figure out if you will get any on the January 24th.
Yeah,
already.
and you will have had to have been active, I think, during some time period. So if you're just hodling, then there's a chance you might not be getting any free funds. But it might be worth checking out. It depends. We'll see where the price is at the time that the tokens are released.
For those of ye out there enjoying the show, your captain would love to get some feedback on how best to improve it. You can find me on Twitter as Captain Crypto HD, and on most of the high seas of social media as either Captain Crypto or Captain Crypto Show. Just be on the lookout for my logo. Also, be aware that due to the technical aspects of each platform, that my podcast feed will always have the most up-to-date and latest revisions of each episode. So if you're enjoying this episode, feel free to give your old captain a review on iTunes and share this episode with the rest of your crew. Now, back to the show.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, obviously it's a brand new year, and I think a lot of us have looked back on 2017, and definitely it was a very active year within cryptocurrency. I think probably the first year where cryptocurrency really started to become mainstream. You're at the point now where you have taxi drivers and grandmas who are buying cryptocurrency. But that's 2017, and I think I want to focus a little bit more on the future. So 2018, I'm kind of curious, Jackson, what do you think this year will be like? Which currencies do you think will do well? Which ones do you think will not do well? Or what are you looking forward to the most? What kind of developments that you think will come this year are you looking forward to the most?
Well, if you remember for the last times that I was on the show, I'm pretty much a Bitcoin maximalist for the most part.
Yeah.
I actually do think Monero is probably the second most interesting project, and I think that I have Kylan to thank for talking me into that
I've been
one.
shilling really hard.
But since Bitcoin is my pet project and the one that I pay the most attention to, I guess I'd talk about that one. I definitely don't want to predict where the price is going to go. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
it's impossible.
And nobody does. But I have been trying to look into what the future improvements to the Bitcoin protocol might be. And so I'm really excited for Skroner signatures.
What is that?
So Skroner signatures are going to basically allow you to aggregate signatures. So when you have a Bitcoin transaction that has lots of different pieces that you're trying to combine together and then send on as one big piece, that's pretty expensive to do on the
Use
Bitcoin
up a lot of
network.
space on the block.
Yeah, because you have to have a signature for every piece
Right.
of Bitcoin that you want to combine. And those signatures are big, so it's harder and more expensive to do. So with Scrivener signatures, though, you can aggregate all those signatures into one signature. And it also has some privacy ways because it's a little bit harder to tell which pieces you sign
Right.
together. And also you'll be able to get a pretty big a reduction in the amount of data you had to put on the blockchain, therefore cheaper. I think people are quoting like 50% reduction, which is, I think it's 30%.
Right. Have
It's
you?
pretty huge.
Is this really? This is not related to Mimblewimble at all, is it?
No, I don't think it's related.
Yeah, because I've heard some similar things about Mimblewimble, about it being able to make things more private, but also reducing, kind of obfuscating the signatures while reducing their footprint too. So go ahead. What else? I know there's a lot of stuff come down the pipeline with Bitcoin. So what other stuff?
Yeah, and of course the Lightning Network.
That's the big one. That's the elephant in the room, kind of, right?
Seems to be inching forward every day, but inching is probably the primary word there. It seems like it's almost ready to be used for actual Bitcoin mainnet transactions, but I think it will be a long time before there's enough adoption of it that it will be useful for the average consumer.
Yeah, that is probably one of my larger concerns with Lightning Network is even if it works good on paper, the question is, okay, now you have to convince the application developers, the mobile wallets, the hardware wallets, you have to convince them to go through the effort of actually implementing the solution. So if it's not a good solution, then they might give a little resistance and have a preference for pushing stuff like Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Ethereum, Dash, those sorts of currencies. And even if they do some development on Lightning Network, it is something that will take time. But I think if they are able to implement it right, both on the protocol layer and the application layer, obviously it's almost like a holy grail right now, right? If they're able to get it to work well, you can speculate about the price. It's pretty clear that it would cause the price to go up critically, substantially.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. But I think there's actually an argument to be made that it actually could cause the price to go down.
And why is that?
If you were able to get Lightning working well and people started using Bitcoin for consumer transactions, most of the shops and retailers that accept Bitcoin sell it instantly. So having more people using Bitcoin for retail transactions also puts some selling pressure on the price because not very many businesses are looking to hold Bitcoin.
Okay. So that's an interesting. So it'll depend on whether people are buying or selling more, if it puts upward or downward pressure on the supply and demand.
Yeah, but while that argument can be made, I do think that you're right, and I do think the price will go up, but maybe not right away. But as people realize, we can actually use Bitcoin again, like it actually works for retail transactions.
And it's the most secure too, right? I mean, the Bitcoin is by far the most secure protocol out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt. The Bitcoin project is not the only one working on this, so that's what I think is kind of interesting. Is we're probably going to see different implementations of it, different variations. I know on Litecoin they're going to be working on implementing it. On Ethereum they have, I believe it's Raiden is what they're calling it. So you have multiple projects, and those are just some of the more well-known ones. So you have multiple projects trying to implement it, and I think there's also kind of like a central organization. I don't know if they're called Lightning. It's something like that. And so you do have some overlap, and you do have some competition. So I guess that is one of the good things that we most likely will get at least some sort of variations and some sort of competition when it comes to the actual implementation of Lightning Network. So what else? Go ahead.
Let me just wrap it up. I just want to say I want to create a checkpoint for myself and make some predictions that I'm going to come back and check in the future. So I think in 2018, we're going to see a hard proposal for adding Scrivener signatures to Bitcoin. The Lightning Network, usable but not adopted quite yet. And I'm going to say the price will be up from here by the end of 2018. And I want to hear what you have to say, Kylie.
Yeah, I guess might as well start with Bitcoin, right? So I think I'm not as much of a Bitcoin maximalist as you are. I mean, this is not the Captain Bitcoin show, it's the Captain Crypto show. But without a doubt, the fees have gotten to the point where you almost can't even use Bitcoin. So that does put a lot of pressure on developments like the Lightning Network. But the more you try to rush things, you're messing with people's money. So it's almost like you can't rush it. And it does seem like they're doing their diligence. They're not rushing it. But even if they were to say this stuff was coming out in a few months, that probably would still not be fast enough for some of the critics. So I think with scaling is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. I know right now Bitcoin Cash, they're enjoying some of the attention and the buying pressure that they are getting. But there is the question of whether, without getting too technical, their solution is essentially to just keep increasing the block size. There's a question of whether that's a sustainable solution or not. So without a doubt, one of the biggest developments that I'll be looking at is scaling. And like you said, Lightning Network. But to move away from Bitcoin, I feel like I have a lot of different things I can talk about here. Ethereum also has a lot of big developments coming down the pipeline. I know there are some critics that say Ethereum, the way it was written, was not the most optimal way, but they also said the same thing about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is still king. They, like I said before, they are working on Rated Network, their implementation of Lightning Network. They're also working on Proof of Stake. They call it Casper. I don't remember their reasoning for calling it that. I think that's another one of these kind of holy grail things that people are wondering, okay, this is a very big feature moving from proof of work to proof of stake. Will it actually work? And I know you're not exactly convinced, and I know a lot of people are not convinced, and I've seen a lot of people on both sides of the argument that are convinced that what they're saying is true. So I think we might not get a clear answer as to whether it can work well or not this year, but I think we will start seeing more developments on it and more testing it out, I guess you could say, even if it's being done on actual blockchains. Within Ethereum also, I know they're working on sharding with it, which is another very big scaling solution that they're coming up with, where they're essentially trying to make it so that they can take the blockchain, which is now larger than Bitcoin's, and they're trying to make it so that they can essentially cut it up into pieces so that no one has to really hold a full node of the blockchain. And this one sounds, I'm not going to call it far-fetched, because within cryptocurrencies, they are able to pull some of the stuff off. And I sometimes am not exactly sure how, but it's something where if they are able to pull it off, I'll be more impressed with that than I will be about Lightning Network or Proof of Stake. I mean, if you're able to really cut down on the scaling, then that makes everything easier, and it alleviates some of the other issues that you're having with just about any of the major cryptocurrencies that they're either seeing now or that they will be seeing in the near future. So that's Ethereum. I mean, I feel like I can just keep on going down the list here.
We want to hear your thoughts on Monero the most.
Yeah, well, I was just about to talk about that. So Monero, without getting too much into the weeds on the technical details, the way they don't have they don't have market-based or market-decided transaction fees like Bitcoin does. So what they have is they have an adjustable block size, but then a fixed transaction amount. That's based, I believe, on the size of the data. So they're actually implementing, I think in March is what they're aiming for, something that's called bullet proofs, which takes the size of your average Monero transaction and cuts it down something like fivefold. So it's only like 20% or 30% of a normal transaction. And that should make Monero scale quite a bit better, because that's actually one of the biggest issues that it has right now is scaling. Now, with that said, there are multiple hardware wallets that are working on integrating Monero, so I think that's a big one. I know mobile wallet support is something where they are severely lacking, and I don't want to get into too much details, but at Edge there is a little bit of chatter about that. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but essentially if I want to integrate it, then maybe I need to step up and do the integration. So, there's a little bit of, okay, if you want to integrate it, then why don't you integrate it? And I am a developer, so I think that's a fair response for them to say. Now, aside from those, I feel good about Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin, because while Bitcoin has issues with scaling and transaction fees, the other reliable cryptocurrencies whose transaction fees are lower are probably going to pick up a little bit of market share, and I think that's a reasonable expectation. But I'm not expecting too much from those really. So I'll move on to some of the other cryptocurrencies that I am interested in. So the two that are, I guess one of them's a little bit more well known now that wasn't before, was Cardano. Have you done any research into Cardano? Okay, so it's a relatively, I guess I can't call it new, but recently it's gotten a lot of attention. And essentially there is an organization that's creating a cryptocurrency, and it sounds like it's going to be a lot like kind of a mix of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I read through their white paper, and I got some opinions from some of the other developers at our Edge team, and we kind of were unanimous we kind of unanimously decided that we liked the white paper. We thought it had quite a bit of promise. I liked the way that it was written. I think technologically it made a lot of sense. They took a very, I would almost say, holistic approach to things where they're looking at kind of real world examples. But then also I listened to an interview, and their guy that's in charge, I don't remember if it's John Hodgkinson or something like that. I listened to him speak in this interview, and it sounded, I liked what I was hearing. So Cardano is one of the cryptocurrencies that's a little bit less well known that I'm paying attention to now. There are a lot of new ones that everyone's all hyped up about, and Cardano is one of them. But unlike many of those other ones, I think Cardano actually might deserve some of the praise. I was actually going to sell a little bit of my Monero for Cardano today, but I had problems with the Monero GUI. And unfortunately, I missed out on Cardano. Essentially, I think it doubled in price or something like that today. But I mean, that sort of stuff does happen often now in cryptocurrencies, so it's not completely it's not like there won't be other opportunities. But the last one that I want to talk about, and this is one that I'm actually really excited about, was as time goes on, I become more and more of a privacy advocate. For whatever reason, I just like people having more control over their money, and that means having control over information about their money. So there is, is it Paul Shapiro? Maybe I'm getting my developers mixed up, or Andrew. Well, I forget the developer's name, but there's a guy from the Bitcoin project who did a lot of work on Mimblewimble, and I want to say that, I don't remember if that's range proofs or not. But essentially what they're doing is they are working on a new cryptocurrency called Grin. So it's GRIN. And a lot of the names for this cryptocurrency are references to Harry Potter. So I'm not really a big Harry Potter guy, but so if some of these names sound strange, that's why they're references to Harry Potter. Mimblewimble was a spell that would make it so that you couldn't speak, couldn't say anything. So when it comes to privacy, you can see how that's a little bit of a tie-in. But essentially, Grin, they're implementing Mimblewimble, and they have it seems like their developers have quite a bit of pedigree. These are not just some random script kiddies, as they say. These are some serious developers that have a lot of experience working with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And right now, the cool thing with Grin is that they're just on testnet. So that means that when they actually go live, you will be able to mine it. You can be one of the first persons to mine it, or first people to mine it. And they're using a sort of CPU-intensive mining algorithm, which means that if you just have a normal computer, you will be able to mine and get some of this Grin cryptocurrency. So for once, I'm excited about a cryptocurrency that isn't even live yet. And when the time comes for it to go live, I'm probably going to meet up with people in my area who are interested in it, and maybe we'll have an official meetup where we'll show everyone how to mine it, so that not just so that I can make some money, but so that my friends and whoever else in the area is interested has the potential to make money on it. Of course, that's assuming that it does well, but I am very bullish about it. So I think in 2018, those are probably the stories that I'm most looking forward to. I guess the other one that is also an elephant in the room is Edge Wallet, and the company that I work for. We are releasing our new app. It's a mobile app for iOS and Android that has multi-currency support. I'm not going to go too much into it here, but multi-currency support, shape-shifting, and we also have kind of like a one-click login sort of feature that we're trying to push in the cryptocurrency ecospace called Edge Login. So ultimately, that's probably going to be the one development or the one project that's going to affect me the most, because obviously I am an employee there. So that is actually being launched, I believe, in a couple weeks. I don't know the exact date, but probably within the next couple of weeks, you'll hear me on one of these episodes, and we'll fully go through everything, because this is a big game changer for Edge, and yeah, I'm part of the Edge team, so I'm very excited about it, and I know the rest of our team is excited about it.
Can I try to put you on the spot for 1 second? And
yeah,
see
if I don't like it, I'll edit it out.
Come up with 3 predictions, hard predictions that we can hold you to, and see how you did in the new year.
Yeah, for the record, these are just predictions, and it's hard enough to predict things in the real world that are not cryptocurrency related, but cryptocurrency related, I mean, these, you have to take it with a pound of salt, because I don't know anyone that's consistently predicted anything. Let's see. We'll pick some of the stuff that you could expect. I would say Bitcoin, what price will it be at this time next year? So at the beginning of 2019, I'll probably guess, I would guess 120,000.
Whoa.
That would be my guess. That's almost tenfold. Yeah, that's a lot.
That is bullish. I like it.
You like it. Let me think here. Monero, let's see here. Right now we're sitting at something like almost 400. I will guess that this is a difficult one because Monero is just not as well known. I would guess that it will end up at, I'd say 2,000. That's not super bullish, but
If
I think
Bitcoin
adoption
is
will
that
take
high,
time.
I would think Monero would even be higher. So in your world,
I feel
think
crazy
that
putting
is
it at like 2,000 or something though, you know.
In your world, I think that's a dovish prediction.
That's fine. That's my prediction anyway, though. Let me see here. By the end of the year, Grin will probably already be live, and you know what? I don't know enough about the scaling, not scaling, but the distribution.
Yeah, I just want to say a little bit about that. I'm actually pretty excited about that one too. You're completely right. From the minds that are surrounding it, seems really interesting. From everything I've heard,
Talking about Grin?
Yeah. From everything I've heard, many of the Bitcoin developers were incredibly impressed by the Mimblewimble paper that Grin is going to be based on, and I think it's going to be really awesome to see it in action. So
I haven't had this much confidence about a cryptocurrency that hasn't been launched yet. Usually I just roll my eyes, but on this one it was a little bit different. I mean, it's at the point where I don't know. I had to ask myself whether I even wanted to say something about it on the air or, you know, in my podcast, or if I even want to tell anyone anything, because the more people know, the more miners there will be, the more competition there will be. But the flip side is if you get a lot of people mining it, then it becomes more secure and it's more likely to survive those first few years, I guess. So it is kind of like a catch-22, and I err on the side of kind of being more inclusive and letting people know about it. So who knows? Maybe if we do have that meetup where we're setting everything up, maybe I'll see you there, right, Jackson?
I'll definitely be there.
So that's it for this week. We should be back next week, but until then, this is your captain wishing you fair winds and following seas, guys. Set sail.